Dad jokes. We've all heard them. We've all used them. They've been around for a long time, and they aren't going anywhere. In this speech, you'll learn a little bit more about the history, types, and mental processes that go behind the infamous art of wordplay. Please welcome Angela.
I named my iPod the Titanic, so every time I plugged it in, it would say the Titanic is sinking. I wasn't originally going to get a brain transplant, but then I changed my mind. Right? Puns are often underrated, but since I have your pun-divided attention for the next 5 to 7 minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit about the history of the pun, some different types of puns, and a little bit about how your brain processes them. The pun has been around a long time. But first, let's explain what the pun is. The pun is a figure of speech that involves a word play with a double meaning. And there's been evidence throughout history that all different cultures have been using the pun. For example, in ancient Egypt, they used them for their myths and dream interpretations. In ancient Mesopotamia, about 2500 BC, they had a very primitive form of writing called cuneiform, and that was actually made of pictorial elements, and they took elements of 2 different characters or words and fused those together, so that was also an early form of punning. In ancient China, for a very specific example, in about 300 BC, a specific poet used the term shi, S-H-I, which means power and position, and he used that in reference to the king to basically say the king has power because of his position. There's also a synonym for pun called paranomasia, and that word has Greek origins. The word para means beside or alternate, and onomasia means naming. So alternate naming, alternate meaning has Greek origins. And almost every major language uses puns. But since they're so specific to the language and the culture, you have to be a part of that language and culture to understand why they're funny. So now I'll take you through a couple of different types of puns. First, we have homophonic. Homo meaning same, phonic meaning sound. These are puns that sound the same but have different meanings. Does anyone know what this one is? Do you want to say what it is?
Okay.
Too much time on your hands. Too much time on your hands. Yep. My brother sent me this. Next we have homographic. Homo meaning same, graphic meaning visual. So these are ones that are spelled the same. Glad you appreciate these. These are ones that are spelled the same but have different meanings.
Wait, explain that one.
The picture?
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. Next we have figurative language. These are ones that kind of surprise you because they use the words or phrases in a way that you weren't expecting. Time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. Next we have recursive, and these types of puns are ones that you have to understand the reference in the first half in order to get the second half. And these are the ones where it's especially apparent that there's a cultural aspect to it. So if you don't understand Freud, then you wouldn't understand why this one is funny. And lastly, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a graphic designer, but these are my favorite visual puns. And pretty self-explanatory. These are taking visual elements and merging them together in a clever, creative way. I also wanted to include something that is not a pun, but is sometimes confused with it. It's called a malapropism. And this is when you use a similar word, but you're using it incorrectly. So Michael Scott from The Office does this often, and this, if you can't read that, he's saying, they're trying to make me an scapegoat. So these are not puns. I'd like to also make the argument that it takes a lot of mental processing to understand a pun. Throughout the ages, the pun has been considered the lowest form of wit, but it has been the subject of many academic studies. There was a University of Windsor study where they showed puns to the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, and they found that the left one processed it more quickly because it's the linguistic side, but it did also require the right side because that side catches the double meaning, so it gets the punchline. So they do have to work together. Puns used excessively can in rare cases be a sign of brain damage.
No.
There is a neuropsychiatric disease called Witzelschut, and in those, the characteristics of that would be for a person to impulsively say jokes and puns and not be able to control themselves.
Oh my God.
But it can also be a sign of intelligence. There's a 2011 study titled Humor Ability Reveals Intelligence, Predicts Mating Success, and is higher in males. Now, I don't know what type of women they're attracting with puns, but to each their own. So love them or hate them, puns have been around for a long time, and I guarantee you that you haven't heard your last. Now that you know a little bit more about the types of puns, hopefully you will take that knowledge with you the next time you decide to join in the fun. And you have to admit that the brain is pretty impressive that it's able to process puns so quickly. I mean, it's like half a second and you're groaning, so if nothing else, at least you know you get it. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned a little something, and this concludes my figure of speech.